Afternoon, I'm Chuck Manansala from the Medical Cannabis Research Center. Allow me first to express our great thanks to Novax Transitions, especially its Executive Director, Ines, who is our partner under the Philippine Drug Policy Reform Coalition, for bringing Dr. Carl Hart to the Philippines. Dr. Hart, I think your talk here today connects the Filipino voice to the international dialogue on drug policy reform. And thank you for your awesome talk. I have two questions for you. The first would be about two questions regarding the advocacy for medical cannabis. Right now, a bill has been filed in Congress. This is House Bill 4477. That is the Compassionate Use for Medical Cannabis Act. In the process of aiming for its passage and for gaining support for medical cannabis, we have been continuously presented with 5 concerns. These 5 concerns attract the strongest resistance coming from policymakers, from professional organizations, and from a lot of online comments. And this would be that marijuana should not be approved as medicine because 1, it is addictive, 2, it is toxic, 3, it alters the mind, it damages the brain, and it leads addicts to commit heinous crime, very violent crime. I have not seen any statistics on this. Maybe there should be more digging, but I would like to know your views on these 5 concerns about cannabis.
Sir, does that also include your second question?
Well, the second
Please
question,
include the second question.
maybe should be stated so you can answer it also.
Yes.
Your observations in the United States about legalizing marijuana as medicine has been successful in 23 states, 2 includes recreational. Can you share any lessons we can learn from the U.S. experience in our effort to make cannabis available here in the Philippines as medicine?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
The first question dealt. You asked about the addictiveness of marijuana. So, one of the things that we've learned from our years of experience with marijuana around the world, about 9–10% of the people who use marijuana will become addicted. So, any psychoactive drugs, you have the potential for addiction. That's just a fact. But when you compare, for example, marijuana to something like tobacco, 1/3 of the people who use tobacco will become addicted. So you talk about 9–10% of marijuana smokers, about 1/3 of the people who use tobacco will become addicted. About 15% of the people who use alcohol will become addicted. So the notion, or if people are are mainly concerned about the addictive potential of marijuana, all of the evidence suggests that it's one of the lower addictive, it has one of the lowest addictive potential. So that's, I guess you can deal with that in terms of the evidence. Just cite the evidence. It's just inconsistent with the comments that people are making. Other points that you were making in terms of marijuana causes these brain changes or what have you. You know, if a drug is psychoactive, it's going to alter your brain. Now, you and me having this discussion, or people here today, your brains will be altered. We call that learning. And so the fact that marijuana alters your brain in some way, the question becomes, does it alter it in a way that is toxic or decreases human functioning? There's no evidence of that. And then another point you were asking about, now this is, again, I want to make sure that we clearly understand this, because in the Philippines, you all use Tylenol, right? You all know acetaminophen, Tylenol? Everybody knows Tylenol? What do you?
Call it here paracetamol.
Okay, say that again.
Paracetamol.
Right on. So that drug is responsible for the highest numbers of liver toxicity in the world. That's the drug that causes the most amount of liver toxicity, taken in doses that are large. But we don't take it off the market. The point is that all of these drugs have potential toxicity if used inappropriately. With that drug, we balance the risk and the benefits. The benefits outweigh the risk. And in some cases, with marijuana, medical marijuana, the benefits outweigh the risk, just like any other drug. So that's what we have to understand. Of course, there's potential toxicity, but the benefits outweigh those risks. And then the notion that marijuana leads people to engage in heinous behaviors, crimes, that's 1937. I mean, people who are making those kind of comments, I don't even know how to address those anymore. It's so outdated. I don't know what to say. When we engage in these conversations, you want people to have to bring a genuine interest and a genuine comments. So when we think about, again, all of the people who've smoked marijuana around the world, and all of those people who have made these contributions to our world, it's just inconsistent. And then I think about all of the doses of marijuana that I have studied in the lab, that other people have studied in the lab. They're not going out harming people. And this is not to encourage them to use marijuana. This is just stating a fact. And it's not genuine. If people are making those comments, you're in a conversation with someone who's not being genuine. And so I don't know what to tell you to deal with people who are not being genuine. And I think the next part of your question, you asked about our experiences in the United States in terms of medical marijuana. 23 states have legalized marijuana for medical purposes. Please understand, in the United States, this is still a heated discussion. But one of the things that has happened in the United States is that the lies have been exposed so much that the voters have decided to legalize marijuana, not the medical community, although the medical community, there's a large number of people in the medical community who support the potential use of marijuana. Now, we also have to understand that for all of the conditions or illnesses that we talk about, there are multiple medications that are used. So marijuana may not be the best medication for one indication, but it might work for some people, whereas not work as well with other people. So I think in the United States, the thing that we're starting to see is that people realize they have been lied to so long. And so I think we have this backlash, and that's why people are really pushing for medical marijuana. In some cases, they are overreaching, where they're saying that marijuana will be useful for some condition that I don't know if there's any evidence to suggest that. But I think this overreach is in response to having been lied to so long. But the bottom line is this: it's clear from our studies, other people's studies, that marijuana certainly can be used for some medical conditions. In the United States, we have oral THC, for example, approved federally, at the federal level, for increasing food appetite for people who are dying of AIDS wasting, for reducing nausea related to chemotherapy. Smoked marijuana is certainly useful in those conditions. It's now, we have demonstrated, other people have demonstrated, it might be useful for some types of pains. You can use it in combination with opioids. You can decrease the amount of opioids that you're using when you use it in this combination. So there are a number of things being learned in the United States, and I think that more and more states are going to legalize marijuana for some medical purposes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That's a great way to start the open forum. Ma'am,
Hi, good afternoon.
name and organization, please, if you represent any.
Emlyn Olfindo Santos. I am with the Inner Wheel Club of the District 378 Inner Wheel Clubs of the Philippines, but I am also from the College of Music. So good afternoon, Chancellor and Ma'am, Professor. My first question might shock you. Have you ever used any of those drugs that you mentioned today? Is it, Chancellor? The three of you. Can you answer that?
Of course.
Yes.
Uh,
Okay.
you kn-
Bravo.
It deserved another round of applause, right? Thank you.
No, I mean, I wrote about this in my book. You know, that's one of the things about the book. It's quite revealing. And again, it's not to encourage other people to do what I did, but it's just a fact.
Oh my goodness.
Chancellor,
one from
no, you're
Collegian
not
here,
going to
no?
be sanctioned.
Yes, no, no. Yes, I have used them. And in fact, it's because I've used them that I'm very, very conscious about my own children, about not forbidding drugs, about talking about it. And it's also guided me because I have a son with ADHD. And I think twice and thrice before using Ritalin because I know Ritalin is in the same class as shabu, right? And but my doctor's saying you have to use it. You have to use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ma'am?
I feel so uncool all of a sudden, but
That's
okay.
okay. That's okay if you haven't used
Don't feel
No,
left
no, no.
out.
Okay, so I have used drugs like caffeine,
Okay.
alcohol, and I did study in Berkeley, so I did have experience with marijuana. But it didn't lead into a gateway drug for me in terms of the other ones. So there you go.
Thank you very much for answering honestly. You are not going to be judged. My second question is actually related to what our Chancellor said. How would you tell this to your children, if ever for the doctor, Dr. Carl, did you ever already tell, or did your children, if they're small, maybe not yet, if they would want to venture into drugs, what would you, in your personal words, say to them? Thank you.
So I have a 13-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 31-year-old. I don't want to say anything about their drug use, or that's for them to say. But I wrote a piece on alternet.com where I had a conversation with my 19-year-old now. He was 16. And so my kids have been going with me into the lab to see me administer drugs to people since they were able to walk. And so we've been having drug conversations for as long as they can remember. But our conversations don't really focus only on drugs. Our conversations mainly focus on what I expect of them as humans. And what I expect of them is to make a contribution to the society, mainly being a voice for poor people and people who've been shut out. And so if anything gets in the way of that, anything, from drug use, driving their car too fast, a girlfriend, video games, any of those things get in the way of that goal, doing well in school so they can make a contribution to the society. If anything gets in the way, then they have a problem with their father. But if none of those things get in the way of them achieving that goal, they don't have a problem for me. So the major thing we do is we reinforce those long-term goals that we think are important. Not drug use, not video games, not any of those things. We emphasize making a contribution, making a contribution.
Thank you. Yeah, sure, please, please. Because I thought you were going to practice with this child. That's all. I'm just kidding. What the messages are.
I think the key word there is contribution to society. Because again, the way, the demonizing again of drug use and drug users, it obscures it prevents us from appreciating people for who they are. And I had it in my notes. I forgot to mention this is a good opportunity to do it. Look at Nora Honor, right? Nominated to be a national artist. It was not confirmed by Malacanang, and everyone knows why, because she had a drug charge. She was caught with methamphetamine in California, and she did community service. If she had been caught here in the Philippines, they'd throw her in jail and throw the key away, right? She did community service in California, but she lost the National Artist Award because they couldn't see her beyond the drug user, right? I'm glad to say, as UP Chancellor, that next week, on the 27th of August, UP Diliman is giving her the Gawad Plaridel, which is the foremost media practitioner in the Philippines. We are proud of Nora Honor, right? But you see how, again, people's views of other people are clouded by drug use.
Quick.
Okay. Well, I have a very skewed population that I see. No, because obviously the people that don't have problems aside, that don't have any functional impairment, meaning they didn't get kicked out of school, they're not they don't have run-ins with the law. I don't see them. That's why I feel like I don't want to share too much, because really what I address is not much the drug use, but what's going on with the family. No, you don't really see. It's the myth. My family was so happy, and then drugs got in the way. Usually, what happens is that there's already something there that was only really exacerbated by drug use. And a little bit of a personal anecdote, because as I said, I was in Berkeley for a while, and my younger brother was with me. I made sure, because I knew he wouldn't have any other opportunity to. I said, take a walk with me now, because in Berkeley, if you're not, it's the hippie capital of the world. So every 2 blocks, we were walking from my house to my school, to UC Berkeley, that we would smell it. I don't know if you've ever know what that smells like. Now, my mom always thinks it's a skunk. She's like, there's so many skunks in this town. And no, but for me, it was more of teaching my brother that's the smell, right? It was more of so that you know, because sometimes for me it's more of like not using it without control, or sometimes even without knowledge that this is what you're ingesting, for example. So for me, it was more of that. It's like I would rather you know it. I would rather you experience it if ever you'd experience it, in a controlled setting, in a safe setting with me, so that I can at least, so something like that, no? And I guess, without putting my parents on the spot, they're still in a very binary kind of way, right? Good or bad. So I hope it doesn't get to them, what I just disclosed earlier. But I felt I needed to give my younger brother that education. So I felt that was important. So
Yeah, Dr. Anna, our forum is online right now. Okay. No, just kidding.
well, good thing my parents are not internet savvy. So.
Thank you. According to my mobile, we have about 40 more minutes for the open forum. So no pressure to the next few question askers. You don't have to ask 2 questions. You may ask just 1 question. Thank you. Yes, that was a code. Number 3.
Good afternoon. I am Gideon Lasco. I am a medical doctor and also a PhD student taking up medical anthropology. And I did some work studying drug use among young people in a Philippine port community. So I'd like to thank Dr. Hart for that very thought-provoking talk that I am sure really contrasts with the paradigms now with our government. So it was my observation in my research that young people ascribe certain uses for the drugs that they take. For example, shabu, they found it very useful because they need to work in the port where they are, and they need to stay all night to sell the different merchandise to the passengers. So they needed the shabu to make them stay awake. On the other hand, the marijuana they think it's useful because when they cannot sleep because of the shabu, they need the marijuana to make them fall asleep. So my first question relates to that. I'd like to know your thoughts on these certain roles or functions that drugs play in the users' lives, and what do you think of them? And then the second question, which is also related, is your comment earlier about this alternative, active alternatives, like this $5 reward. Because the young people I study, I also found that if they're offered jobs like being a bus conductor or being a Jollibee attendant, then they're actually willing to abandon their drug use, even though they will be considered addicted by the conventional definitions. So I'd like to know how this notion of attractive alternatives affect, or what are the implications of this notion to our definition of addiction?
Dr. Carl, before you answer, Jollibee is our version of McDonald's. It's a fast food chain.
The first question you asked relates to the role that drugs play. So one of the things that you point out is that people use Shabu to stay awake. Well, they're becoming pharmacologists. I mean, this is why militaries use amphetamines to stay awake. So you're absolutely right. But one of the things about amphetamines that there's a disadvantage if you need to go to sleep. For example, cocaine, the effects of cocaine is a lot more short-lived, so it doesn't disrupt sleep as much as Shabu. And so Shabu is a really difficult one if you need to go to sleep. And so marijuana, like you point out, might be used for that. And marijuana certainly helps some people sleep. But there are other things that people use, like that some people use opiates to help them sleep as well. But that's what people are experimenting with, and they are, in many cases, they're doing this experimenting, and sometimes they could be helped if we teach them what we know, so we help to keep them safe. And it's a real difficult one. That's what people do. They experiment. And so the role of these drugs is, it's what we know. It's what your observations were. You're absolutely right. People use these things to enhance human functioning. Sometimes they get in trouble because they don't have as much knowledge as they should have. The second point was related to alternatives, but I'm not really sure what you were asking about the alternatives. I could barely hear it.
Yeah, I was wondering if,
Closer to the mic, please.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you.
so if we have this notion of attractive alternatives, like the one that you said that people can actually choose a $5 bill over a dose of shabu.
Sure.
So what does this imply to our understanding of addiction?
Yeah, I got it. So one of the most effective treatments in substance use is called contingency management, where you are providing people with alternatives to drug use. In some cases, money, in some other cases, vouchers, all of those sorts of things. What that means is that we need to make sure we provide people with alternatives, as Anna pointed out. Well, someone asked the question, how many of us have we used drugs? I know a lot about drugs, and I know that drugs, for example, can really increase my euphoria. Or I know so much about drugs that one might say, why aren't you taking drugs? Because I have these powerful alternatives. I rather, for example, write books so I get praised, write articles so I get more money, write more books so I come to the Philippines. All of these things are alternatives. They are powerful alternatives. Throughout my life, I've had these alternatives that are more attractive than the temporary use of drugs in moments that I'm trying to become better so I can get more alternatives. And so what that says to a society is make sure that people have opportunities, alternatives. If the society doesn't care about certain people, certain groups, like we in the United States, we don't really care about poor people, and there are other people we don't really care about. They have less alternatives and opportunities, and they have more problems, and it's not a surprise.
Thank you, sir. Number 4.
Good evening, Doctor, and Mr. Chancellor. I'm a student here at UP. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a student here at UP, studying under the College of Science, BS Physics. Okay, so this is a more sociological question. All right. So since drug use, as you suggested or as you stated, has been a part of almost every culture in the world, if not every culture in the world. And as you presented a while ago, Dr. Hart, that most of these negative claims are based on biased and questionable studies, then where or when did this cultural worldwide stigma originate from? And what are the most logical roots of this cultural bias?
Okay, do you all?
It's a very big question.
No,
Yes.
no, it's a great question. It's a great question.
Great question.
I can tell you something about the origins in the United States, and then I'll try and extrapolate to the world because of the influence of the United States, particularly on UN conventions and the world's drug policy, more global drug policy. When we think about the United States in the 1800s, for example, late 1800s, all of these drugs were used. They were legal, and people used them. In about the early 1900s, 1909 or so, the United States had wanted to have trade favors with China. The Chinese were not happy with the United States in part because of our racism towards Chinese who were there with the railroads and so forth. We were racist towards that group. In one way, in order to try to show that we were better people in the United States, or one way to increase our trade, the trading favors of China, the Chinese at the time were experiencing what they called an opium problem. So the United States wanted to show solidarity with the Chinese by pushing for a global ban on opium, the opiate products. But first, they wanted to pass federal legislation in the United States banning opium, or opioid-related products. Well, in 1909, that didn't work because in the United States, nobody wanted to pass a federal law for anything. And then, about 5 years later, a few years later, the United States included cocaine in this federal sort of law. But they associated the cocaine use with black people and said that the black people were engaged in these heinous crimes when they used cocaine. They said there was a number of things said, but there were three important things. They said cocaine made black people better marksmen, made them more murderous, and made them unaffected by 32 caliber weapon bullets. So police forces moved away from the 32 caliber weapon to the 38 caliber weapon. Anyway, it was compelling. And so the people of the United States passed legislation at the federal level to ban cocaine as well as opiate-based sort of products. And that's one of the early origins. And so in the United States, we discovered that when you don't like a particular group, you can associate a behavior with that group, and you don't have to say you don't like that group. You can just say you don't like that behavior. And that behavior, when you go after that behavior, like that drug use, you're really going after that group. And we did it constantly, over and over and over, including today. We still do it. And it was one of these things that we exported around the world. And we also influenced drug policy around the world in the United States. So that's my narrow perspective from a U.S. perspective in terms of how these things happen, at least in the United States.
Mike, do you want to contribute anthropologically in terms of the Philippine experience? How might that have started here, the stigma in terms of drug use?
Can have a whole encyclopedia.
Yes.
Actually. I mean, anthropologically, we know all cultures do have mind-altering substances. Even the Philippines, you know, if you did a bit more work, you're going to find, besides marijuana and the others, people have learned to use stuff like trumpet flowers. Going up to Baguio, you see all these, and they're actually the datura species. And they can give you a high. They have their own mushrooms from Mindoro and all. But the uses are very culturally specific. You don't find addiction, you don't find, I've not heard of a trumpet flower addict yet, right? Yet they're all over. You can buy them Tagaytay, and they make nice ornamentals, incidentally. You have cocaine, for example. Coca leaves are chewed, by people in the Andes to keep themselves in high altitudes and all. So there are not just recreational but cultural uses for these. And they become targets of legislation when, as Dr. Hart points out, they come to epitomize a certain group of people that they don't like to do. Or people who are, in anthropology, we say the other. No? Iba sila sa atin. No? The legislation actually on opium, they couldn't get the federal laws passed there, but it's interesting, there's a link to the Philippines. The missionaries here American missionaries were very much opposed to it. No? Their leader there was Bishop Brent, who started Brent School. No? He was very influential in American politics in getting that passed. But his concern was really the Chinese the opium trade, both in China and in the Philippines, because in Chinatown, the Chinese had their opium dens as well, and they were seen as dangerous. I mean, these are aliens and all. No? So, kaya ano nga sa limuot, it's very, very complicated, and yet I think this is what people need to know about, because again, like in the 19th century, it was legal. Jose Rizal used it, and even up to fairly recent times, you could get Robitussin with codeine over the counter in the Philippines. It was a favored drug as well, because it had therapeutic uses. My pharmacologist friends say that a lot of the early cough syrups worked mainly because they knocked you out. And they were really codeine-based. It didn't stop your cough, you just went to sleep. No? Kaya we do need to look into the history and then look at the anthropology, how people look at it culturally. People use it in groups. No? They go into a group high. And then look at how it might be applied to a better understanding of all the other drugs that we use. No? Maybe one more mind-altering drug here. Nga. No?
Nga.
Betel nut. No? Really, you should try it sometimes. They're worse than amphetamines. No? But a lot of this, if we go back to the cultural setting again, when we talk about what can we offer as alternatives, no? I keep thinking of that community across the street. No? They're stocked there. We have to block off that street because there are many drug addicts now who go in and all, which means we would have to tear down their basketball court, okay, so that we can block it off. And I say, that's the last thing. That's the only recreation that they have. That take away the basketball court and you're going to have a bigger problem. But people don't see how this all relates. Look, when I go to urban poor areas, I can understand why people use shabu. There's nothing else there that can give them. I tell my students, if you're looking for alternatives, maybe we should have in PE meditation classes, mindfulness classes. I tell them meditation's more fun than drugs and sex. Of course, no one believes me about the sex part. But I'm not saying don't use things. There are other things we could do, right?
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 5, please. Oh, sorry. Number 5. Ma'am, you're number 7, I think. You're for the next round, yes? Because there is a number 5, and then we have a number 6, and you have a number 7. Yes. Sorry. Next round. Sorry. The gentleman first. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Jemark Mutia. I'm a newly licensed physician. I would like to address this question to Dr. Hart. You kind of mentioned earlier about the medicinal applications of marijuana and disproving the myths Sir Chuck said earlier. But from a pharmacological standpoint, what's the safety profile of cannabis in comparison to conventional drugs such as opiates, sedatives, and chemotherapy drugs? And my next question is, where are we in rescheduling marijuana? Because as we know, it's Schedule 1. It's the most notorious, as the government said, if it's Schedule 1. So where are we in rescheduling it? Thank you.
Good. Thank you for the questions. The safety profile of cannabis, the cannabis products, marijuana, compared to something like the opioids. The opioids are it's easier to die of an overdose with an opiate than marijuana. That's the major sort of thing. One of the things that marijuana advocates are fond of saying, and they are right, is, do you know anybody who's died of a marijuana overdose? And nobody can say they do. But opioid, of course, there are people who die. So the safety profile in terms of death there seems to be a large therapeutic window, which is a good thing. When you ask the question about where are we in terms of rescheduling marijuana, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't think that we are very far in terms of rescheduling marijuana, in part because it's easier to pass a law than to reverse a law. And so I participated back in June in congressional hearings about this issue. And Congress seemed to be wanting to do something about it, or they appear to, but I don't think they will. So I'm not optimistic that marijuana will be rescheduled. That's why individual states have taken this issue into their own hand. So I don't know the answer to that question.
As we said, there are still a lot of things we do not know, and a lot of things are still coming in terms of information. To manage the time, there's a proposal. Sir, thank you for the question. Number 6, may we know the nature of your question, sir, so we can address it. Number 7, please go to the mic as well, so we can know the nature of your question. And number 8, please say your question as well. So we leave the option to the panel to answer the questions as they see fit.
I really will ask just one question.
Okay.
It's a little bit tangential, but we've been talking a lot about lab effects. And what I'm interested in is, what do sidewalks pharmacists make available? Do you know, based on your research or other people's research, what's actually being sold? I used to live in LA, half a mile from where I used to live. Lots of people on Normandy were selling lots of things, and it was being called crack or cocaine or ecstasy, but you knew it was other stuff. And so it's being combined with these other things. Do we have reliable information about what range of things are being combined with the drugs that you're studying, as well as what some of the effects of these combinations are on people? Again, I think this speaks to legalization, because you can't predict what people are getting into their bodies under these conditions.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my question.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One moment. Number 7.
Hi, my name is Malu Marin, and I work in the field of HIV and AIDS. When it comes to people who inject drugs, we know that the harm is not just in relation to possibly getting infected with HIV, but also with hepatitis C, which is in fact one of the more virulent infections among injecting drug users. We also know that evidence in many parts of the world has shown that needle and syringe programs, as well as oral substitution therapy, have proven really effective in curbing the spread of HIV and hepatitis C, and has also shifted the discourse to public health rather than an issue of criminality and law enforcement. So I think the challenge here is, how does science translate into public policy? And that's really one of the critical issues that we face here in the Philippines as well, because we have an increasing incidence of HIV and Hep C among injecting drug users. The other thing is the whole issue of drugs being big business, and how do we actually deal with that? Because I think that compounds the issue of criminality, and we know that politicians, maybe law enforcement agencies are on the pay. I'm gonna probably be in danger for saying this, but that is a reality. So my question really is, what can you recommend in terms of strategies and actions to convince our politicians to support the reversal of these draconian drug policies? Because it's not just in the Philippines. I think in ASEAN, for instance, the whole all the countries in the ASEAN region have in fact been very clear about their vision of a drug-free society, and we know, and you said that that's a stupid vision, and so I think we need to have ideas, for instance, what have worked in other settings, for instance in the US, in terms of reversing these drug policies.
Thanks. One more, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm
Good
Miss
afternoon.
Heidi Paulete. I'm a special education teacher, And I would like to ask how this drug really affects pregnant women, and does it really leads to impairments or hinder development of the fetus?
Okay.
Thank you.
So 3 questions, and we have 18 minutes if you want to keep time. There is, what do we know about the quality or the quantity of drugs sold on the streets? How do we use science to inform policy? And what are the implications about drugs vis-a-vis pregnancy?
Okay, the first question was like what's really being sold and adulterants. This is one of these areas, for example, where we all are uniformly agree like the current focus on the war on drugs is wrong. Now, one of the things that we know is that there has been a lot of money pumped into law enforcement, and there's a lot of money tied up into the current approach. So this is really about money. So you all really need to understand that this is about money and jobs. So law enforcement oftentimes are really closed to hearing alternatives, in part because they will lose resources. One of the ways that you could just shift what they're doing and they keep their resources is that you address the issue, the question related to adulterants. Law enforcement, when they confiscate drugs, should be required to do chemical analysis and publish it for the public so people in neighborhoods know what is contained in the drugs. Because the adulterants oftentimes are worse than the drug that the people are seeking. Law enforcement never publishes this information. If they were really concerned about public health, this information would be made widely available to the public. It's not. And so the question is right, and the concern is right. We should be concerned about the adulterants and street-level drugs because they can be far more dangerous. Okay, the second one, the question was related to how do you convince politicians? If you are trying to convince politicians, you are wasting your time. You should be trying to convince the voting public. Politicians follow the vote. They have never led, despite the misconceptions that people have that they are leaders. They don't lead. They follow what public opinion says. And so one of the reasons that I wrote my book was to educate the public. And when the public decides, gets educated, that this is wrong, the politicians will follow. But until the public decides that this is important, the politicians are not going to change. Now, the final question was related to pregnant women. So the question is related to pregnancy. When I think about pregnancy and pregnant women, I have testified in court a lot about this. Women who have had their children taken away because they test positive for marijuana. Now, you want to encourage pregnant women to eat right, exercise, do all those sorts of things, because those things could have bad effects on the fetus. When we think about drug use, nobody wants to say to a pregnant woman, it's okay to smoke marijuana. Nobody wants to say it's okay to do cocaine. But when you look at the studies that have been done on those drugs don't indicate that these drugs cause all of these detrimental effects that is in the public's consciousness. Now, that's not to say that pregnant women should go out and smoke tobacco when they're pregnant or use some other drug when they're pregnant. That's not to say that. The point is that you should eat well, exercise, do all those sorts of things because they can be far more detrimental to the developing fetus than these drugs have been demonstrated to be.
If I may
Please.
answer the second question, I think about how do we get public policy to change. In my experience, I am not a really savvy politician, no, but I the way I've done it or I've helped done it is I just kind of bypass the politicians altogether. I go straight to NIH, I go straight to DOH. There's a, if you frame it from a health perspective, right, that you're saving more lives when you do this, that you're increasing their quality of life, then they're more likely to listen. And then when it comes to the sort of more bureaucrats, the one that actually gives us the money or not, then we show them how much it saves them money by focusing on treatments that actually work, by focusing, for example, on the harm reduction interventions that you've mentioned, by how that actually has a higher success rate than any other, and in the long run, it'll save us more money. Money somehow seems to be the key to getting any grants approved. If they can say, oh, we can save money from here. So just on that sort of strategy, that has worked for me.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Mike.
The question on street drugs got me thinking. So I'm sure the people working for medical marijuana are aware, but you might still want to check. Uruguay they didn't use the word legalization. There's another Spanish word that's evading me right now, senior moment. But the way they argued there was it's more of a regulation type, because we can't get the parents here going out to Kalinga looking for marijuana, right? You need standardized preparation so that you know what you're giving to your patients. That's another argument that has to come in part of the compassionate use. So if you can do some work on Uruguay, that's the first country outside of the Northern Hemisphere that was able to get medical marijuana going. Unfortunately, elections are coming in 2016. So this is not the best time to go for legislation, but we should continue with the education of the public to get the public to understand the views of parents of children who do need marijuana. I think the compassionate use is important. Then we can embed that in the larger issues of the rational use of not just drugs as we're talking right now, but of medicines in general. I'm going to magpapaalam ako ngayon. I'm going to have to disappear because I promised the baseball and volleyball teams. I told them I don't just love the basketball team. There's a long story there. No? So I have to tell them I'm going to root for them as well. No? And they're waiting for me to go over. They do win games more often than the basketball team. So maybe we'll get Joel to practice your cheering and you come and watch the games and help us. We're number 3 in UAAP overall. No? In basketball, we're at the bottom of the cellar. Okay? Yeah. No, this is just their practice. I need to go and give them some moral support. So I'll see you guys at the games or whatever. No, at future symposia, because I know this will not be the last of the conversations. And thank you for Dr. Hart.
Let's give Dr. Mike some love. Thank you, Dr. Mike. Thank you. Imagining you playing basketball is such a sight to see. Yes. Good to see you.
Is that it, Joe?
One moment. We were going to ask your permission. There are 2 more. And I think one last is from Twitter. There was someone who asked from Twitter. We have about 11 minutes. So sorry. Sir? Oh, sure. That's urgent. Oh, okay, one moment. Can we ask we'll ask the nature of their question first, and then maybe you can, yes, take a break, yes. Sir, in the white t-shirt, you were raising your hand earlier. We have time for your question. We have a question from Twitter. Will that be asked by Mick Lee or somebody else? Any Twitter questions? We have one. Okay, sir.
Good morning.
Good afternoon. Or good evening, yes.
Good evening. I am Cyrus from UP Manila, and I'm just curious on how we are going to promote the safe use of drugs. So are we going to put it in an isolated area where we could monitor the users of the drug, for example, for the adverse effects of the drug? Or are we gonna do it the other way, like massive education campaigns, like that? Yes.
Okay, one moment. From Twitter, the Twitter question is...
Hi, this is for Dr. Carl Hart regarding your studies. How did you go about the ethics of your researches, administering illicit drugs to the sample? And how are we making this info available to people in lower social classes, especially those who do not have formal education?
Could you please repeat that? Sorry, I didn't get that.
The first question is for Dr. Carl Hart regarding his studies. How did you go about the ethics of your research?
Ethics.
Yes, administering illicit drugs to the sample. And how would we make this information available to people in lower social classes, especially those who don't have access to formal education?
I'll
I have
take
to make
that
it
one
more
first.
accessible, yes.
Okay, the ethics. So when you think about research, you can do research as long as you have a compelling rationale to do it. And when we think about all of the drugs that I study, they are all, most of them are legally available. Cocaine is legally available. It's a Schedule II drug. It's used in some surgeries. Methamphetamine is legally available. And then when you think about the fact that I live in a society that pumps a lot of money into research and wants to know about all types of activities, wants to know how the world works, we would be unethical not to do this kind of research. Because if we didn't do this type of research, we would be basing our policies, our education, our treatment on ignorance and not empirical information. So you can do studies as long as you have a compelling rationale. That's not too difficult. And of course, there are certain types of ethical requirements we want to meet. We don't want to expose someone to a new drug. All of these people have used these drugs previously, and they're not trying to quit. These are non-treatment seekers. So there's a systematic sort of steps that we take in terms of ethics. That's no problem. In terms of making this research available to the public, that's why I wrote the book. It's available to the public. It's written in accessible language, but these papers and the science is also available to the public because it's all supported by taxpayers' dollars. So all of these papers are available. And if you don't want to read the boring scientific literature, you can read the book.
Sorry.
Yes. Okay, so I promise I'll take the first question. Yes. I don't know if you want to run or not, but so the first question, so the experience I've had when I was in San Francisco, for example, so at least I've seen it in practice, how the safe use, well, in terms of those that, for example, the needle exchange centers. So these are actual centers with a medical staff. There's usually staffed by nurses, and they are given clean needles to use it with. They have their own room. It's a serene space. It's pretty safe. And then a nurse or a medical staff is on hand to ensure no overdose. So in that way, it's very safe. But I think his point, and I'm just kind of filling in for him as he takes care of his needs, is that, how do you teach people how, one, definitely education, right? But in the same way that how do we teach people safe uses of alcohol, safe uses of cigarettes, or even safe sex, right? So it's a matter of education. And also, I think for me, because I think my point is more process than it is the actual content, even just providing an environment that's not stigmatizing, an environment where you feel that if at a certain point you have become that 10 or 20% that has become addicted, that it is safe and not stigmatizing, or you're not, there are no sanctions for you to say, hey, I need some help, I've done this and maybe I'm not feeling so good. So I think such an environment, and that takes again a more sort of systemic approach, but I have seen methadone clinics, needle exchange clinics as well. So they're because they have been able to get funding from the government. Yeah. That's the big key. Here it's probably gonna have to be mostly a private endeavor until policies change.
And that's something to see in the future. Thank you, Dr. Anna. There is a request for one last, for our last 4 minutes. Please do stay. There is a very special clap for the audience. Yes.
Okay, good evening, I'm Eileen.
Hello.
Actually, this is not a question. It's a statement. we've heard a lot, I mean, scientific, we heard the sociological, psychological explanation about these things. And I think the challenge is for us here who are participants for this forum that we would enlighten our parents, or we would, I mean, talk to our children.
Yes.
And share these wonderful ideas with them. And we have the social media like Twitter, Facebook, and
Yes.
whatsoever. And each one of us here could share what we learned here, and then it would spread out, and that comes the education thing. And I'm very grateful that we have an organization like No Box, who we know for a fact that there's someone who could take care of our needs. And we have speakers like Dr. Hart and Dr. Michael Tan and Dr. Anna, who could help us with this one. So it's not, I mean, this is not the start. We've started
Yes.
before, and we're continuing the challenges. So with this, before we end this forum, I would like to pose this challenge to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.